Welcome to The Real Tea. I'm your host, Tammy Murphy, broker owner of RH2L, bringing Miami Valley real homes to love.
And I'm Elle Sollenberger to give my perspective as a home buyer.
We're going to give you the key to Miami Valley real estate.
All right. So I saw another TikTok video regarding real estate the other day, and I just had a couple questions because I've never heard of this before.
Okay.
So this couple is going to buy a house, and they need a piece of paper with some information on a debt right before closing. And long story short, it is a child support debt. Is child support generally in Ohio tied to a mortgage or a piece of property?
Tied to the property specifically?
Correct. They could not sell this house without paying off this $20,000 child support debt.
So he or she had gone through a court case and lost, and the judgment was made against them. So yes, it was put against the property, and it has to be resolved before they could clear to sell.
So by court case, are you talking about when they go to like the family court and they say you owe this much per month, or this was like the attorney general came and said you owe this much money?
I don't know that it's the attorney general that's involved. So your normal court ordered child support isn't factored in as far as against the house. Okay, it's not a lien against the property. That's a lien potentially against your payroll, and your employer may be required to withhold those. Or you pay it independently if you're good and you follow the rules, then you're paying it independently, and that's not an issue, right? But if it goes past that and somebody doesn't pay their child support, the other party involved is bringing a case and having a judgment warranted against them. And then the sticking point is that how are they going to charge $20,000 to your employer? Well, they can't. So they look to the assets to see how do they charge against that. So that's where it became a lien against the property. Delinquent property taxes that have not been paid are then assessed towards the property that's owned.
Okay, so is that something when you're buying a house as the buyer, that would come up in the title search?
So a preliminary title search on a home would potentially show that is a lien against the property. So the buyer in their title agency that is selected, doing their due diligence, would find, and that would go back then to the seller side, not necessarily details to the buyer.
So with this story, the sellers were not making any money.
On the sale of the property.
On the sale of the house, yes. And so to get this house sold, the buyers did have to up their price that they were going to pay for the house.
So they covered the cost of this.
And they covered the cost of this $20,000 child support debt so that they could close.
Wow, that's amazing that happened. I mean, it's amazing that the buyer decided that was worth it. So we hear about similar when there's property tax delinquencies, that the delinquent taxes have to be paid when you're in the real estate process. We just learned that might not be true if somebody's doing a private deal. But through the normal real estate process, the property taxes are brought current through the sale and the closing of that. And so the funds are withheld from the seller. If it is a short sale or a tax lien or a distress type of situation, the seller may have disclosed that, hey, I have $20,000 in property taxes, but I'm not making any money on this deal. So if you want the house, then you're going to cover that cost. And you just know as the buyer that that's part of the deal. You're paying for what I didn't pay, but you're getting the property. Mm-hmm. So in that scenario, it makes sense. It's understandable. And that's kind of a up-known situation. Maybe it's not known in advance, and that's again where the title agency is doing a title search and finds that there's delinquent property taxes, brings this up, seller side, buyer side, how is this going to get handled, and then that's just agreed upon, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, not at all typical. So it's only going to come down to whether or not that lien has been attached to the property, and it's recorded in time enough that is found. So another issue could potentially be is maybe that just happened. if somebody knew that they were behind and delinquent on their child support or the property taxes, and they knew that they wanted to try to beat the system. You know that, so then you go to sell the house and you're just going to try to make a deal happen quickly. Buyer doesn't do their due diligence, they're not in the normal process, or any of these things aren't recorded yet. Potentially, that transfer of title takes place and then it's after the fact. That then comes down to, hopefully the buyer did get title insurance protection, because that will help at least in the legal cost of what needs to be done and the rectifying of the situation. But potentially, there are avenues where the buyer now is going to get stuck with that bill.
So if in a scenario kind of like this where you were selling a house because you couldn't afford it anymore, you also had this child support debt, could you just not sell your house?
For sure.
And
you're not obligated to sell your house.
No, I mean, could you not sell it? Like, you don't have an option. You can't afford it, so you're just going to have to wait for it to go to foreclosure?
Yes, you could do that. I think being proactive in the situation and understanding, okay, I'm falling behind, I'm not able to pay these expenses, the expenses are just going to continue to incur, maybe I just tap out. Just do a short sale, distress sale, let somebody else take it over. I'm not going to walk away with anything, but at least I don't incur any further debt. That's a better option for people to realize, address the situation, do something. Sitting back and not doing anything is certainly going to be more negative impact, because it's not only going to affect you here in this situation, but potentially any future living arrangements that you're going to need. Because some landlords, if you're just going to rent, some landlords are pulling information and they would see this happen. They may not want to rent to you. And certainly it's going to affect you as far as your credit score with a potential lender moving forward and anything else.
Right. So you talked about short sales. Can you explain that a little bit? A short sale or a distressed sale?
So we haven't had short sales per se since about 2008, 2009 through 2011, when all the things happened and the economy tanked and everybody was, under on their mortgages. So when you owe the bank more money than what the property value is, that's where there's the potential for a short sale. So you have to get bank's approval to say sell it for less than what's owed on it. So it's not a standard. Banks don't have to allow you to sell it. They can foreclose and they can pass judgment, and you be responsible for any debt that's not yet received, right? So if the bank says we're not going to agree to a short sale, we're not going to agree to take less than what you owe on it, okay? So you're responsible. Let's call it $100,000 you owe. You owe us $100,000. I don't care if you can sell it for $75,000. We're not willing to take $75,000 and write $25,000 off. Well, part of what happened in 08, 09, and all of that was that the banks were getting paid if they accepted those deals back, right? So the money grab that happens on the bank side is there's a reason for them to accept a short sale, because I'm not going to be short. I'm going to get $75,000 from you. I'm going to turn around and charge to the government bailout program the additional money and then my expenses, so I'm going to be made whole. That is why short sales came about, and banks were willing to allow somebody, they weren't getting any money out of the transaction, but they were able to walk away and potentially not have any negative judgment against them for any difference in the cost. A distress sale is any of those times where the seller is having to sell the property because they can't afford it. They may not be able to pay off the property taxes that are due. They may not be able to make whole on the mortgage amount that's due. And so that distress situation comes in there. It could be a death in the family. There's other reasons why. The distress sale means there's more urgency to it, and we're at this dollar amount because this is what's required.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's some states are working towards helping people resolve child support issues. And you think, what does that have to do with me and my house, right? and being able to sell it or not sell it or have this lump sum come out of there.
Right.
Again, that example of they can't charge it against your wages because that, especially at that kind of dollar amount, unless you hit the jackpot, which, by the way, if you hit the jackpot and you owe child support,
does come out,
it's coming out. So they do have a way to find all of that, which is good. But it is certainly important for people to have title searches done. When you're listing a house and going to sell it, maybe you don't even know. Maybe you forgot. Maybe, this happened so long ago and you didn't realize that this action really went through the process. So it may be a learning experience to find out. And can you make an agreement potentially to say, I don't want to have that involved in this, but I'll make payments. I'm getting this amount of money when I sell my house. I can pay half of it then and then go into financial arrangements. Those are all kinds of conversations that potentially could take place for sure, besides the buyer taking on that debt.
Right. Luckily in this situation, they had $20,000 in their savings account that they were able to use because the property did not appraise for the higher price.
Oh, wow.
So they were still able to close.
But that buyer actually came out of pocket the additional money.
Yes.
And paid somebody else's child support. That's a dedicated buyer.
Right.
Good for them.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us today on the Realty Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.